everybody. Welcome to Inside Scoop with Sue. And we're at 2:30 today to accommodate Judy French, who's out in LA, and to make sure we get to this topic because October is National Bullying Prevention Month. And we don't want to let it go by without addressing how it is for parents when they're dealing with kids who are coming home sad and depleted and hopeless. And we don't know what to do. Who does know what to do? Well, we're in luck today because Judy French knows what to do. She is the coordinator at Pacers National Bullying Prevention Center. And so I actually want to start out with the advice. Like, what can we do when our kids come home from school? They walk in the house. If your kid takes the bus, the minute they get off the bus, right? You know by their body language, something's not right. What is the best way for us to greet that child and help them?
If I had a list of 100 things to do, the first 99 would be listen, which is the thing that is hardest for someone like me because I want to get right to the fix. But it is the same for our kids as it is for us when we come to someone with a big problem or with something that's going on. We really want that landing pad for the story. Now, not easy to get a story from your child, especially in adolescence, when the last thing they want to do is divulge something that perhaps they feel they caused. And bullying is like that, especially for targets of bullying. There's some shame attached to it. Often kids think that it's something about them, it's their fault. And so it's not easy to get those stories out. We have some resources to help. We actually even will have scaffolded conversations up on our main website to have that good, productive conversation with your child. But know that those conversations can be very halting and they don't all come out at once. But your antenna, when they go up, are often very accurate. And you may have to find the side door into that conversation as opposed to hitting it head on. But the best thing to do is, if we're thinking about these things ahead of time, because prevention is part of our name, that we're keeping those lines of communication open as much as possible. And I've often said to kids, because I was a middle school advisor for a long time, and I'd often say to kids, can you tell me what's going on? And if they said no, but we were both clear that something was going on, I'd say, can you tell someone? Is there an adult in your life that you can talk to? Because this is bigger than you. You need to talk to them. But we actually have a great resource for difficult conversations. And it's called the Student Action Plan. And it sounds very formal, but it's actually, 3 steps to get into that conversation and get a kid unstuck from wherever they are. Because very often targets think there's nothing that can be done. And
so can you give us, first of all, is it pacer.org? Is that what it is?
So pacer.org/bullying is the site for the National Bullying Prevention Center. And then we have a site specifically for teens, for middle school and high school students, which is pacerteensagainstbullying.org. And that's written precisely for them, for their developmental level and for the kind of issues and the way that they speak about them. Even and including a page that is why kids don't tell. That's on the teen site, or advice gone wrong, which is one of the reasons why when parents need to have these difficult conversations, we say right away, slow down, because that will help the story get out faster. And if we jump to the advice part for the child, if we jump to, okay, here's what we're going to do, here's what I'm going to do, that shortcuts their part of the processing of the event. So we really do want to get that story out.
You mentioned that there are 3 things in this on this resource.
Yes.
Can you just give us the headlines of the 3
things?
Yeah, and are those things for parents or those the things for kids?
Well, for both. At the developmental level of a teen, middle school and high school, some of this thinking part they can be doing on their own, but the resource is designed for them to work on it together. And I think that's part of the process of saying you're not alone. I know bullying makes you feel like you are, but you're not. And then the 3 steps are super simple. There's nothing revolutionary about it. It's just that it's there for parents to sort of lean on because those conversations, that mama bear, papa bear stuff gets activated right away. 3 steps. 1, describe what happened. Give me as many details as you can. And that may be the part of the story that is the most halting, that we just don't get out fluidly. The second step is the one that helps them learn self-advocacy. And this is why it's brilliant. The second step says, if this situation were better, what would it look like? If this were better, how would people be acting? How would they treat you? What would they be doing? That is the magic step, that says this solution doesn't happen without your input. So this is why we love this tool, because the kid really gets to participate in crafting the solution. The third step is, okay, I know you don't want to, but we have to involve other people because this problem is bigger than you and me. And I'm not going to go and knock on, the parents' doors and do that. Please don't do that. That's a terrible idea. So who do we need to get involved? Because sometimes a lot of times you have to get somebody involved at the school. There might be a teacher at school who's witnessed this or knows your child really, really well. And that might be a good person to contact, maybe healthcare provider, that kind of thing. And so make that list, ensuring all the time that the message that's underneath all of this is, we want to keep you safe. We want you to be safe. Or if you're the one doing the bullying, you need to stop that behavior, and we got to figure out how then to repair. But that at every step, the child is contributing to that solution. Self-advocacy, big thing at Pacer.
Well, I love everything in those 3 points. I'm picturing, number one, my anxiety level very high, right?
Yes.
So I have to come at this from a different perspective, like a listener and not a solver. But then the other piece of it is that I have to have a willing partner in this.
Sure.
So
yeah.
when those open questions get asked that way, do you hear from parents or from kids that it works better, that they're more likely to share?
Well, again, you'd know your child best. In a general sense, what we hear is that the tool is very much a de-escalation device. It helps the parent as much as it helps the child, because it puts things in a nice order that you don't have to invent on the fly when you're high anxiety. So what we hear is that very often the story does not come out in a linear fashion. So you don't get, beginning, middle, and ends. You get middle and hot button right now. And then maybe, in several conversations, you might get back to what the genesis was. But generally, it helps to tease out more detail. Sometimes I feel like it might be best for certain kids to start off with step 2. This is an awful situation. It doesn't have to be this way. It won't be this way. I'm here. I'm with you. We'll find others with you. But I do recognize that not all kids want to be forthcoming. Again, especially if they feel as though somehow who they are or what they did played a part in the bullying happening to them. And kids often take the blame for that. So if that's so, I would reach out probably to someone in their world, another adult in their world that I have rapport with, or at least who I know has good rapport with my kid, and say, hey, my antenna are up. Something's going on here. Have you seen anything? Have you recognized that there's something different in how he is at school? I'm just checking in, because we don't see who our kids are when they're outside of our supervision. They're often different. They're often different creatures at school or on their teams. We don't see that behavior. It really behooves us to connect with other adults in our kids' world to see if they're seeing what we're seeing.
So. Yeah, sometimes you get really surprised to find out that actually your kid is involved in it, and you're like, smugly like that other bad person. But so in the scenario where my kid is not talking to me, and I need to outsource someone else having the conversation, because I want to put my kids' their well-being as the highest priority.
Sure.
And my deep desire to be the one they trust somewhere below that. So then do I need to be part of the story? Like if I say to an aunt or a family friend or the spouse, like, hey, I need your help, I'm not getting anywhere.
Yeah, and something's going on. We need to
and
get to the
something's
bottom of
going
it. Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
And when you get the information, I want you to report back to me, right? Like,
No, I would, yeah, I know that it's super tempting to do that, but I do think part of the advocacy piece and rebuilding, trust or gaining trust or whatever is the transparency. And what I tell kids, what I've told my own, is if it's an issue of safety, your parent has to be involved at some point. If it's an issue of safety, whether it's bodily or emotionally or mentally, others have to be involved. And the people who, and again, that's assuming that we're dealing with a more or less nuclear family where there's a parent or a caregiver who's directly in the home now. So and that's a healthy relationship, but I would assume, and I would be very transparent with kids to say, yeah, we have to involve these people. But what we're going to do, we're going to put our heads together and make sure that what happens here is confidential so that there isn't more retaliation or more hurt or harm. We want to keep you safe. I understand.
also the right person, because sometimes you might think the
Exactly.
teacher's going to help, but the teacher's actually part of the problem, right? Like
Well, sometimes teachers, and when kids write in, because I do the advice column for the elementary school site, which tons of teens write into. So it's interesting. But when they write in, they say, I told the teacher and she didn't do anything. I say, well, I don't know. She didn't or she couldn't. Find another adult. So sometimes kids have great rapport with their classroom teacher, and that's wonderful. I didn't always. There were years where it was great, and there were years where I was not it. But there's likely to be somebody who gets your kid at school, maybe an advisor, or maybe it's a librarian. When they do research on who kids trust at school, you know who comes up first?
the
Top of the
librarian.
list, the maintenance guy. Well,
That's
think about
awesome.
it. Think about it. The maintenance guy, the people that work in the cafeteria, sometimes people in lower years who are, supervising the yard, they don't grade the children. They just say, hey, hey, Julie, how are you? How's it going? And it's all, on a different social level. So I think that's why sometimes. But
Yeah, it's just love. There's no judgment. There's no judgment there. It's just love.
But and sports teams too, or theater, if your
Okay.
kid's in theater or band or whatever, there's likely an adult in all those places that they feel they can talk to. And that's what I tell kids too. Who, the 4 to 6 places you go, because really that's pretty much it for most people, adults too. But for the children, who is the adult in each one of these places that you feel you could go to if something's going on? Because it's not going to always be us as much as
Yeah.
I might want it to be.
So in the story of the bully and the bullied, if you are in the relationship with the bullied, it seems like the only power you have is to help the bullied cope. That the bully lives somewhere else. It's always hard to change that story. I
Well,
think okay.
yeah, what's interesting about those rules, first of all, is that, and the reason why we don't use bully as a noun is because those rules are changing all day long. So a kid who's bullying someone in the morning might be a champion for someone at lunch, and giving them a seat at their table, and might be being bullied themselves in the afternoon. So your question, as I would like to interpret it, is what I see anyways, from if I were from the school's perspective, is I have to do a 360-degree holistic look at everyone involved in the situation. It seems like the person who's been bullied, the target, is the one who gets the positive attention, or rather the attention, the healing attention. But a lot of kids who bully are being bullied as well. And we've got to look at why this is happening. So one of the reasons why we get so stuck too is because the language of actually labeling a child a bully never comes off. Once that child is labeled a bully, that's it. And so that's part of what, part of our mission to create social change around this issue is looking at that kind of thing. We get stuck applying that kind of label to a child in development. And, humans grow and change, but certainly children are growing and changing hour by hour sometimes. So,
Yeah, I really appreciate that distinction. I'm going to rephrase my question. As the mother in the story, no, I really do appreciate making that distinction. But when your kid comes home and you are facing your kid,
yeah.
is there I remember hearing this woman on one of the like a series of on, I don't know what it was, like a morning show or something, and she was working with a kid to get him to hold himself more upright, like walk in the world like he wasn't didn't have a sign on his back that said like kick me, right? And so the idea that we can only work with the kid that's ours. I mean, there might be a bigger story that we shouldn't let go of. Like that child over there also needs something. That teenager also needs adults to care about them. But right now, I'm worried about the well being of my child.
Sure. Sure.
So, are there ways for me to bolster my kid so that they can navigate tomorrow better than they did today?
Yes, that is a great question, and of course, we can only parent the child that is with us and bring them along and develop them. Um, Bullying makes you feel less than you are, makes you feel like you're all alone. So the first thing that we can do is to make sure that this child knows that that isn't true, and so that we not only are we there, we are present for them. We're going to sit and listen, which is the thing that they want the most. But we're going to figure out who in their peer group can also do that. Because what kids who are being bullied want the most is a peer to sit with them and listen as well. So we're going to figure out that as well. I am very hesitant to tell targets that they need to change who they are, either by their stature or anything else, and that will, somehow ameliorate the problem there. I would be very careful. I do think it's a good idea to walk through the world strong and with confidence. That's also a very long-term sort of proposition. I don't think that could proposition, excuse me. That's not an overnight thing. The overnight thing is to make sure that there are adult eyes and supervision where the bullying has been happening, to create a safety plan so that tomorrow the same places, if this kid has to go into the same places, they're not in the same danger. Maybe that means they take a different route. But again, I'm always very leery about changing what the target has to do, because it just doesn't seem fair to me. A lot of the lessons need to go on the other side. So I would want to make sure, even when I was saying, stand up, that the message I was giving was, we're gonna try this. We're gonna try, because a lot of people might, there are a lot of folks who teach self-defense, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's wonderful, but they somehow also pitch themselves as bully proofing your child. And that's not what bullying is. Target doesn't have the power to change that situation. Should they carry themselves better? Absolutely. But knowing that they have the support of the adults and peers around them is pivotal to making tomorrow feel better, to making me want to get on the bus or go to school or any of those things.
I feel kind of pessimistic in the story that you're telling, which is I have to do something as a mother.
Right.
I have to empower my kid in some way, and it can't be reliant on other people stepping up for my kid. It has to be, because kids know, and they report this all the time. We've been hearing this for years. They don't think the adults are going to make a difference.
That's because the adults aren't trained to make a difference, and the adults have not really taken a look at this as something that can change. So people tend to think that we are stuck with bullying forever. And I myself, coming into this work, was astonished to learn that bullying is a learned behavior. It's a learned behavior. No one is born knowing how to bully another. Yeah, we learn that negative social behavior by viewing that social behavior. We learn the lessons, even if we don't do it ourselves right away. We learn what it's like to have a little bit of power and what you can do with it. Yeah, so those things can change. Yes, this is the long term. This is the big view. On the ground, short term, what your child wants is to know that they're not alone, that they can be safe, that they can get to, sorry, my computer wants to restart, and that would be bad.
That would.
Yes, that there's a safety net around them. And, bullying is a community problem. It is definitely a community problem. It's not for one person or one mom or one family to solve. It becomes a community problem, because if it's happening to your child, it's likely in the culture of the place where that's happening. And we need to get in there and create a healthier community. Short term, again, We need to have adult eyes where bullying is happening. We know, every school knows where the hot spots are. It's the spots where there are fewer adult eyes. And as they go forward in middle school and high school, there are fewer adult eyes in these places, and that's developmentally appropriate. But if there's something dangerous happening, and again, some of the bullying that occurs later on, it becomes a felony. You pass 18 and you can't just batter someone, right? So early on, the bar for some of that behavior is pretty low. So the community, as in either the school or the theater group or whatever it is, has got to make sure the adults in charge need to make sure that they're really paying attention and that they have the building blocks in there for a healthier community. So as a parent, something happens to your child, it's happened at school or happened in some kind of relation to a school activity or an endeavor, you need to get directly to the school. And every school's a little different how you do that reporting. I might start first with somebody I have rapport with at the school that I can speak to. Yeah, that's part of my action plan. And then from there, I would want to know what I should do next from that person at school, who's going to follow up with me and when they're going to follow up with me. We have a lot on this on our main site it's actually like a micro site in the main site, what parents need to know. It'll scaffold productive conversations with the school or any other group that you have to deal with where the bullying's occurring.
Are schools hiring you?
The outreach that we do is free. So hiring, no. I go into a lot of schools. I love to talk to faculty staff, love to talk to parents. Can't get parents to come. Very, very difficult. A good parent group might be anywhere from 10 to 20 parents at a school that, has 700 kids. It's very difficult to get parents to come unless their child has been directly involved or is directly involved. So prevention is not such a big topic. Intervention, yeah, everybody's like, what do I do when? I'm like, well, how? Occasionally we have a conversation where we're 6 steps ahead of it. Like, could we do that? I mean, how are we ever going to get away from having intervention discussions?
Yes. So are you able to see it? It makes a difference in the culture? Like when you go into a school and let's say the parents aren't so involved, but the parents also aren't in school every day. So
right.
If you get the faculty on board with some approaches, do you ever follow up and find out that the culture has changed?
I often go back to some of those schools and culture change in a school, this is what I was told by someone who knows, it takes about 3 to 4 years to make a culture shift. Safety, of course, should never take that long, but to shift the culture around to where people don't think that bullying is just a natural part of childhood, that it just happens, it's always going to be with us, like the poor or something, to shift that much, that does take time. In the interim, the education does really help because there are some folks out there highly educated, highly experienced with kids, but they were raised to believe that bullying is actually formative, that, if you survive it, you're better for it, you're tougher.
Well, it seems like a middle school rite of passage.
Well, it definitely peaks in middle school. And if you look at social development, you understand why. Kids are trying on all sorts of hats again. It's a bit like preschool, fireman, fairy, princess, and middle school, I'm emo, I'm whatever the groups are, they're trying on all those things and they're making bigger relationship mistakes. And without some, strategies for solving conflict in a healthy way, some things can descend into power struggles like bullying. So that middle school is where the social emotional learning should really ramp up. But we start to, this is what I see, lower school, I go in to talk to a lot of lower school adults, but then it just kind of tapers off. And I rarely go to high schools, rarely talk to high school parents or faculty staff. It's just,
no one knows your kids as well as they do in elementary school. That's, like they see your kid for an hour instead of the day. Right.
I think as kids develop, there is something developmentally appropriate about stepping back from their social stuff. We don't want to insert ourselves in there, and they should be getting conflict resolution strategies as they go on. But obviously we know some of those are very hard won and take a long time to accrue. Some adults still don't have them. So we know that that's a lot to ask. But what I see is that the social emotional learning sort of takes a back seat, as though that's a lower school thing. We don't do, we do the middle school advisory groups, we do this and that. But it seems to me that middle school kids need much more discussion around this. By the way, when I speak to students, and I won't speak to students out of school until I speak to faculty, staff, and the parents, because the go-to piece of advice is, you're being bullied, you need to find an adult you trust and tell them what's going on. This is a bigger problem. You're not supposed to solve this yourself. So the adults they have to know, but, oh, sorry, lost my train of thought.
No, you won't speak to the kids before you speak to the rest, because they're part of the solution.
Yes, that's it exactly. And I got that momentary little bit of frustration over, again, the adults who are pretty certain that they call bullying conflict, and the kids should solve it themselves. No, it's never a child's responsibility to solve bullying. And this is news to a lot of people, but because of the power imbalance, they can't. So faculty need to be on board. Again, it takes leadership that also believes that. And I do meet folks, out there in the world who are pretty certain that bullying makes you tougher.
Yeah. So I'm going to throw out one story that I don't know when it's going online, but it's going to be on yourtmag.com. And I loved reading this article, and it's about a mom whose kid is getting bullied, and she keeps the kid home from school one day, and she says he's got a wicked sense of humor. And so she says to him, how does this typically go down in school? And they practice new responses to what had been happening.
Yes.
And the kid had red hair. They were making fun of his red hair. And the kid says things the next day like, yeah, I'm on fire. And it diffuses the whole thing. And he comes home from school, skipping into the house.
Yes.
So, if you don't have a funny kid, what are the other things that know your kid, right? And then give them a treat one day and say, let's stay home. And then
I heard a great story just recently I did a group of middle school, high school kids for Tourette Association of America. And this kid said, my dad said to say to the person who's bullying me, are you okay? And he tried it. It didn't stop the bullying.
But it is so disarming.
Yeah, it's very disarming. I'm like, I was like, I'm filing that one away in my own head. I'm going to use that one.
I do that when you're in the grocery store and someone's not being so pleasant. Yeah. I have done that, and it's very disarming to people, because they think nobody really is paying attention to what's going on. So I could see that not always working, but sometimes working.
Yeah, and that's the thing about bullying advice, and we have to remember this as adults. Bullying advice has to be situation specific. So a general piece of advice will not apply to all situations. I mean, my father told me to, pop them in the nose and they'll never bother you again. Don't give that advice. My mother said, ignore it, it'll go away. Neither one of those worked in my situation.
How about this one? He probably has a crush on you.
Yes. Or they're just jealous.
Yeah, they're jealous. That's a good one.
Right? Stu, they're just jealous. This is a phase. They'll get through it. You'll get through it. You'll be stronger. If targets could solve a bullying problem with doing something, with changing themselves or making a joke out of it, they probably would never come to us, because most kids will try all of that whole gamut. Now, I love the whole role play idea, and I love the practice at home, what you could do. And I encourage all adults to do it. Adults hate to do role play, but it is disarming for your child to see you do one of the roles. Okay, I'll be you. You be the person who's bullying you. Okay, go. They don't like it when you do the bully part, but yeah, so I think the role play thing is great. I do think we have to be careful, because with the power imbalance there, in a true bullying situation with that power imbalance, there's very little that the target can do to get the bullying to stop without assistance from a caring adult in there. Give it a shot. I mean, I don't think it's wrong. I think it's great for other situations too, to have those things in your back pocket mentally, to pull it out. Are you okay?
I love that one.
I love that.
Yeah.
I will say that I just, for most of us, it's like 2 days later when we think of that perfect thing.
Yeah, but a parent who's suffering with their kid is going to be thinking about all the ways they can help. So whatever we can give them, go to pacer.org. and
/bullying.
/bullying. And then is there a particular place for parents to go versus kids, or?
Pacer.org/bullying is the main site. Everything's archived up on that site, and it has the huge section called What Parents Need to Know. The huge section also has a big section, information section, that has lots of FAQs and statistics and all kinds of things. And also a special module on students with disabilities, which is our sweet spot at Pacer, because those kids are bullied at a much higher rate than their peers without disabilities. So we want to make sure that they also get, some special targeted information as well. And middle school, high school, Pacer, teensagainstbullying.org.
Great. And Pacer says we can create a world without bullying. So check out their website. I'm sure there's something there to help you. And Judy French, thanks so much for being here with us.
Thanks, Sue. Thank you.